Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. So, whether you're someone who would usually be out tonight and you're at home, or maybe you're a homebody like me and you're just looking for something fun to do to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, I thought it would be a good time to share a free tutorial with you of how to make a needle felted shamrock. So, I do have a free video tutorial on my website that goes over the basics of needle felting if you're new to it. And you'll find that what we're going to be doing is actually very similar to the heart project that's at the end of that tutorial, but we're going to be repeating it a few times to make a shamrock. So this little green heart here is one of the little leaves of the shamrock that you're going to be making, and we're going to do 3 of these and then a stem and put them together to make a shamrock. So you're going to be building it up in steps, one little heart leaf at a time. So all you need is a foam block or whatever felting mat you use to work on. I'm using 1 needle tonight. This is a number 38 needle, pretty much an all-purpose needle, and a little bit of wool. So this is about what I would use for each of the 3 leaves of the shamrock. So you can use wool batting or wool roving, whichever you prefer, whatever you happen to have on hand. And I'm using wool batting. This is the kelp forest color that we have in our shop. So for your first little leaf, you're going to want a piece about this big. It's going to shrink to something about this big. So when you felt things together, the fibers get compressed and then you basically push the air out of them. So it's going to look a lot smaller. So you always need a little bit more than you think you will to begin with. So what I'm going to do first is just push it generally into that heart shape by kind of pressing down the center of the top and kind of folding in the bottom so it has a very loose heart or almost an upside down triangular shape to start with. And then we're going to start by just poking our needle straight into it. So you always want to push your needle straight into the wool when you're felting. Never bending or straining the needle. You don't want to twist it. Because the needle can break or bend. And so as soon as it's kind of anchored to the pad, because felting it a few times will make it so it starts to stick to your foam surface, this allows us to take our hands out of the way and not have to hold it in place for the time being. But you're going to keep pressing down over the surface, and as you do, you're going to start to push in the edges to shape it more into a heart. So I'm going to push down, and I'm kind of going in parallel to the surface of the foam pad. So I'm pushing in there, and you can see that after a few pokes the top gets indented, and it will stay that way. And then I'm going to push in also along the bottom sides to make the bottom point of the heart shape. So you can see how it's starting to take shape already. And then I'm going to go around the whole outside of it and just kind of push it in to really get the form that I want there. And as you go, keep poking along the top surface, and your goal is to poke it down evenly so that in the end you don't have too many bumps and it'll be fairly uniform and smooth. So you're just going to keep going around. It's important to really tuck in the edges before you push down into the wool around the edges, because if you push down around the edges before you've pushed it in as far as you want to get the shape as small as you want, it's just going to be harder to push those sides in later. So better to get your size figured out before you commit to felting it down all the way. So as you can see, it's already shrinking. So here's that one that I had at the beginning. It's getting closer to that size. And also just to show you, this still has quite a bit of thickness to it. So I'm not trying to get it all the way flattened just yet. So at this point, I'm actually going to pull it gently out of the foam, and you can see where the fibers are trying to stick into there. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to hold it for just a second until it's anchored. So now it's stuck in there. So right now I am pushing my needle in about 1 inch into the work, so it is going all the way through the wool and into the foam pad. In a few minutes I'll be lightening up on the pressure so that it stops pushing the wool through the other side, because as you can see, when you push the wool all the way through, the fibers come out the other side and you end up with it fuzzy. And it would just perpetually be fuzzy if you kept doing it with that same pressure. So right now it's okay, but soon we're going to lighten up on the pressure so that it starts to smooth out a little bit more on the sides. So I'm just doing the same exact thing I did on the other side, where I'm felting along the whole surface and then also going along the edges and pushing them in to get it down to the shape and size that I want. And of course you can make yours any size you want. Mine's obviously going to be a larger than life shamrock. So this is a nice beginner activity for adults or a child who is old enough to handle the sharp needle, just because your fingers are not too close to it for most of the time. So you could just keep going along in this same way to shape your heart until you got it exactly the way that you want it. You never really have to be touching it while you're felting it. Or there's one more thing you can do, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and is optional because your fingers will be closer to the needle. But for now, you can keep going along like this. So anywhere that's sticking out is what you push in. Anywhere that you don't want it to be sticking out, where you see it sticking out, that's where you push the needle in. And so at this point, I've felted both sides. I've pushed the sides in on both sides. So now I'm going to flip it again. Always pull it out gently, just so you don't rip up parts of your mat or, pull out too many fibers. I'm going to flip it over. Now I'm going to start poking in only about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. So I'm not pushing it in quite so aggressively. So I may need to hold it in place with my fingers a little bit now, at least around the outside. So be careful if you're doing that, because now we're not trying to anchor it into the foam block anymore. We're just trying to felt this side without pushing the fibers all the way through the other side. So if we do this on both sides, then both sides will start to get less fuzzy because the fibers are not getting pushed all the way through. So you could do this along both sides. Also notice I'm using my fingers a lot to push it into shape as I go. So with needle felting, a lot of times you'll use your hands almost as much as you use the needle to push or pull things into shape. So you'll kind of push them into the shape you want and then reinforce that with the needle to get the fibers actually hooked into place where you pressed on it. And I could do the same thing if this was too small. I could stretch it out. I could pull it and then felt it, and it would keep that new form. It's a very forgiving medium to work in. So I'm going to do that on both sides, where I just lightly felt the surface and lightly felt along the edges. And so this could be where you're finished after this point. The other optional thing I wanted to show you would be to pick up the heart and put it on its side, and with the needle very carefully push in along the sides. And this is why I said this is your fingers are a lot closer to the needle, so this is, take extra caution here. You can go very slow if you haven't done this before, if you're just a little nervous about the needle being so close to your fingers, or you can skip this step altogether. But I just go along the whole perimeter of the heart like this, and what it does is it helps shrink it down a little bit more because it's pushing in all the sides, and it also just tucks in the loose fibers to make it a little bit smoother around the edges in a way that's, it's a little bit harder to reach some of these sides when it's laying flat. But as I said, do what you're most comfortable with. If you have finger guards, this would be a good time to use them. So I'm just going along the perimeter a couple of times until I'm satisfied with the shape that it has. And so I'll lay it down. I can go a little bit more along the surface if I want to. Just kind of want to pinch the bottom into shape there. But after this point, that is one section of the shamrock that's finished. So what you're going to do is make 2 more of those, and then we'll be putting them together.